The headlight swept across our living room wall like a searchlight, and I knew, before I even sat up, that she wasn't alone. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes right before a relationship breaks. Not the peaceful kind. The kind where your brain is already rewriting memories into evidence. I checked my phone. 3:07 a.m. Paige hadn't answered my last text from midnight. Just still out, sitting there like a dare. When the key finally turned, it wasn't rushed. It was casual. Like she belonged to the night more than she belonged to our bed. I heard 2 sets of footsteps. One light, one heavier. A man's laugh, low, confident, too comfortable in my hallway. I didn't jump up yelling. I didn't slam doors. I just stood there at the edge of the living room in sweatpants, watching the scene assemble itself. Paige walked in first, shoes in her hand, hair a little messy in a way she would have called wind. Behind her was Connor, her coworker, the one I'd been told not to make weird. He had the posture of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything. He nodded at me like we'd both made a shared mistake of being awake. Paige's face tightened for half a second, then smoothed out. Not guilt. Irritation. Like I was a pop tire on her perfect night. They didn't look drunk. That almost made it worse. I didn't ask where they'd been. I didn't ask why she was coming home at 3 a.m. with him. I didn't ask what she would have done if I'd been asleep. Because her eyes said something loud, "Don't start." And then she did start. She framed it like I was the problem. Like my boundaries were a character flaw. Like the real crime was that I'd noticed. She gave me the kind of ultimatum people give when they think you're too invested to call their bluff. I kept my face calm. I've learned that outrage is oxygen for liars. Calm is the vacuum that makes their stories collapse. Paige walked past me toward the kitchen, Connor trailing like he lived here. She muttered something about me being controlling, about her having a life, about me making things toxic. Connor hovered by the counter, checking his phone, pretending not to listen, while listening to every word. I looked at him and realized something small and sharp. He wasn't worried about me at all. That's the thing about a guy who's just a coworker. If he's truly nothing, he avoids the boyfriend. He doesn't stroll into your home at 3 a.m. like he's dropping off a package. Paige turned on the kettle. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. She acted like this was a normal Tuesday, like I was an inconvenience for having feelings about it. She threw out the line that was supposed to end the discussion. The one designed to make me back down fast. I waited until she finished. Then I nodded once and said the only thing I could say that would instantly change the power in the room. "You're right." 2 words. Not angry. Not pleading. Just final. Paige blinked like she didn't understand the language. Connor's eyes finally lifted from his phone. I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't demand she stay. I didn't negotiate. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out 2 empty storage bins we used for holiday decorations. I set them on the living room rug. Paige's mouth opened, ready to escalate, but the confidence flickered. She didn't expect action. She expected drama. Connor shifted his weight and glanced at the door, suddenly remembering he had a whole life outside our apartment. Paige started talking fast, like speed could change reality. She implied I was overreacting. She implied I was proving her point. She implied that if I just calmed down, this could be fine. But here's what I finally understood at 3:12 a.m. while the kettle warmed up. Someone who respects you doesn't threaten to leave as a weapon. Someone who loves you doesn't bring a man home at 3 a.m. and then punish you for noticing. I didn't tell her she was a bad person. I didn't call her names. I didn't need to. I walked into our bedroom, turned on the light, and began pulling her things out of the dresser, folded, careful, almost polite. Shirts. Jeans. The expensive blazer she loved because it made her feel untouchable. The lingerie she bought for us after she started staying late at work more often. I carried the first load into the living room and placed it neatly beside the bins. Paige followed me halfway, watching, trying to decide whether to cry or rage. She chose rage, because rage makes you feel powerful. Connor didn't follow. He stayed near the entry like a witness who suddenly wanted no part of the trial. I went back for her laptop. That's when Paige finally moved fast. She stepped between me and the nightstand like I was reaching for a weapon. Not because the laptop was valuable. Not because it was fragile. Because she didn't want me touching it. And that was the moment the jealousy story died. I stopped and looked at her. Really looked. Paige's pupils were a little too wide. Her breathing was controlled but shallow. Her hand hovered over the edge of the laptop like she was guarding a secret, not a device. For the first time all night, Connor spoke, soft, careful, aimed at Paige, not me. He tried to calm her down. That told me everything. Coworkers don't soothe each other in your bedroom at 3 a.m. unless there's a shared stake. I nodded again, stepped back, and let her take it. Fine, I said, still calm. Keep it. Paige froze. She expected a fight. She didn't know what to do with surrender. I went to the kitchen instead. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, letting the quiet do the work. Connor cleared his throat and finally remembered he was just giving her a ride. He slid toward the door, avoiding my eyes. Paige watched him go with a look that wasn't friendly, wasn't casual. It was possessive. The door clicked shut behind him. Now it was just Paige and me, and the kettle starting to hiss like it had been listening. Paige stared at the bins in the living room like they were an insult. Like I was the one humiliating her. She picked up her mug, the one that said Boss Energy in gold letters, and set it on the counter hard enough to make the spoon inside jump. She started listing reasons why she didn't deserve this. She started rewriting the night into something I was supposed to apologize for. I let her talk. Because while she talked, my eyes kept going back to her laptop. And the way she defended it. And the way Connor had tried to calm her down, like he was protecting a shared investment. I didn't need to guess anymore. I just needed proof. So I waited until she finally stormed into the bathroom and slammed the door. Then I walked to the bedroom closet and reached up to the top shelf where we kept the old Wi-Fi box from our last apartment. Inside that dusty cardboard was the spare router I never returned. And taped to the side of it, because I'm the kind of man who thinks ahead, was a small, cheap backup camera I bought years ago after a neighbor's break-in. I hadn't used it in forever. But I remembered something important. 2 weeks ago, Paige had insisted we upgrade the internet, because she started working from home sometimes and needed better speed. She'd been weirdly pushy about it. I'd installed the new router myself. Which meant I still had access to the admin panel. Which meant I could see every device that connected to our network. I sat on the floor, pulled out my laptop, and logged into the router settings. A simple list loaded. Phones. Smart TV. Printer. And one unfamiliar device name that made my stomach drop, because it sounded like a fake label someone would use when they didn't want to be noticed. Office guest backup. It had connected tonight at 2:41 a.m. It was still connected now. From inside my home. While Paige's laptop sat guarded like a secret. I clicked into the details. The MAC address was new. The IP lease started minutes before they walked in the door. And under device activity, there was a short burst of data so heavy it didn't look like browsing. It looked like uploading. Or transferring. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I heard the bathroom door unlock. Paige stepped out, face composed again, ready to finish the conversation. I closed my laptop gently and looked up at her. She didn't know I'd just seen the first crack in her whole story. She thought the night was about jealousy. But it wasn't. It was about what she brought into my home at 3 a.m. and what she tried to carry out. And I realized, with a cold clarity I didn't expect, that by morning, the living room wouldn't just be full of her things. It would be full of answers. Because whatever Paige and Connor were doing, they'd made one mistake. They'd done it on my network. And I was about to find out why. I didn't sleep. Paige did, for a while, curled on the far edge of the bed like she was the victim of my overreaction. Sometime around 5, she woke up, checked her phone, and started typing like her life depended on controlling the narrative before morning fully arrived. I lay still and watched the ceiling. In the dark, your mind turns every memory into a slideshow. The late nights. The team dinners. The way she started dressing sharper for casual workdays. The new perfume that wasn't for me, because she stopped hugging me the way she used to. I used to fight that slideshow. I used to defend her from my own instincts. Not anymore. At 6:20 a.m., I got up quietly and went back to my laptop. Router logs don't tell you everything, but they tell you enough to know where to look. There were only 2 unknown devices that had connected recently. One was clearly Connor's phone, easy to spot, because it connected on nights Paige claimed she'd had girls' wine. The other was that office guest backup. I took screenshots of everything. Dates. Times. Device names. Connection history. Then I did something I didn't feel proud of, but I did it anyway. I opened Paige's iPad. She'd left it charging in the kitchen like it didn't matter. It did. Paige was careful, but she wasn't perfect. People never are when they think they're smarter than you. The iPad wasn't locked with Face ID because we used it for recipes and streaming. The apps were there, sitting like open doors. Her email was signed in. Her calendar was a map. And her messages, some synced, some not, were a minefield. I wasn't looking for romance. I didn't need to confirm that kind of betrayal anymore. I was looking for motive. And it showed up faster than I expected. An email thread titled, Q1 variants plus access needed. It wasn't from her work account. It was from a Gmail address that looked like a personal consulting contact. The names didn't match the company's. The language was specific. Numbers. File names. Attachments with bland titles that screamed, please don't open me if you don't know what you're looking at. Paige worked in operations for a mid-size medical supply distributor. I worked in finance at a software company that sold compliance tools to, among other clients, medical distributors. Different industries, but not as separate as people assume. Contracts overlap. Data overlaps. People overlap. In the thread, someone asked Paige if she could confirm the rate sheets. She replied, "Grant can pull it. I just need you to send the template." My name in a stranger's email. Like a tool. Like an unlocked drawer. I scrolled, pull slow and heavy now. More messages. More references to my access. A note about Connor handling transfer. Then a line that made my throat tighten. Need it before audit. Don't want another Felix situation. I didn't know who Felix was, but I knew what that sentence implied. This wasn't a fling. This was a scheme. The bathroom door opened behind me. Paige walked in wearing my hoodie, the one I'd worn on a road trip last summer, the one that still smelled like the cabin we stayed in, the one I thought meant something. She saw me holding the iPad. Her face didn't show heartbreak. It showed calculation. That was my second confirmation. I placed the iPad down gently like it was fragile evidence. Paige's eyes went to my laptop screen, too quick, too sharp. She wasn't worried about us. She was worried about what I'd seen. She tried to take control fast. She moved toward me, voice measured, tone practiced. I held up my hand, not aggressive, just final. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I asked one simple, quiet question. I asked her why my name was in her email. Paige blinked once, and for the first time since 3 a.m., she didn't have an immediate answer. That pause was everything. Then she did what guilty people do when cornered. She attacked my character. She told me I was paranoid. She told me I'd always been insecure. She told me she couldn't believe I was snooping, like privacy mattered more than the fact that my career might be on fire. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I told her she could pack. Not, we should take space. Not, let's talk later. Pack. Paige stared at me like she couldn't decide whether to laugh or panic. Then her phone buzzed. I saw the name on the screen when she tilted it away too late. Connor. Paige didn't answer. That made her swallow hard. That made her hands shake, just a little. Her confidence finally cracked. She walked into the living room and began grabbing clothes, fast now, not neat like I'd folded them. She started stuffing things into a tote bag like she was escaping a fire. I carried her makeup bag out and placed it with the rest of her pile. At 7:45 a.m., the living room looked like a breakup staged by someone who wanted it to be clean. Bins. Bags. Shoes lined up. Her winter coat draped over a chair. Paige kept glancing toward her laptop like it was a hostage. I kept glancing toward the coffee maker, because my brain couldn't stop noticing stupid details. The way the morning light hit the countertop. The way our life looked normal if you ignored the pile of her belongings. The way betrayal always tries to wear the mask of routine. Paige started making coffee. That was the thing that finally made me understand how cold she could be. She moved like she had time. Like she wasn't in danger. Like she was still deciding whether she'd allow me to calm down and earn her presence again. She poured the grounds, pressed the button, and leaned against the counter, waiting. Then she reached up and opened the cabinet above the fridge. The top shelf. The shelf she never used. The shelf where I kept my old tax files and a folder of personal paperwork. Paige's hand slid toward the back like she knew exactly what she was grabbing. My chest tightened. I crossed the room quickly, not running, just moving with purpose. Paige froze with her hand inside the cabinet. And I finally saw it. A thin manila envelope. Unmarked. Not ours. Not mine. She'd hidden it here. Inside my paperwork. In my home. I held my hand out, palm up. Paige's eyes met mine, and in them was the first honest thing she'd shown all night. Fear. She pulled the envelope out slowly, like surrendering a weapon. I took it and flipped it over. Still unmarked. I opened it. Inside was a small USB drive. And a folded sheet of paper with a list of logins. Not hers. Mine. Usernames. Temporary passwords. Notes about where to find certain folders. I stared at the page until my vision narrowed. Paige's coffee finished brewing with a cheerful beep, like it was celebrating. My hand tightened around the paper. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. This was sabotage. Paige didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply watched me read. And when I looked up, she finally spoke in a tone that wasn't angry or defensive. It was resigned. Like a person realizing the game was over. I didn't respond. I just walked to the sink, held her Boss Energy mug over the basin, and let it slip from my fingers. It shattered in one clean, violent crack. Paige flinched like that sound hit her in the ribs. Coffee wasn't the only thing that shattered. Something in her certainty broke too. Because now she knew I had the envelope. And now I knew she'd been planning this longer than I'd been willing to believe. Her phone buzzed again. Connor. And this time, Paige answered. Not with words. With a look at me that said, if you do this, you're going to ruin everything. I stared back, calm as stone, holding the paper with my logins. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. If she had my access? Then the only reason she needed it was because someone else was already using it. Someone was moving money or data under my name. Someone was setting me up to take the fall. And Connor wasn't just a coworker. He was the hand on the knife. At 8:30 a.m., Paige left. Not in tears, not in a storm. She left with the controlled speed of someone trying to outrun consequences. She carried her laptop like it was a newborn. She carried her phone like it was a detonator. She didn't look back at the living room pile, because she wasn't sentimental. She was tactical. The second the door closed, I locked it. Then I did what people should do more often when they feel panic. I got organized. I photographed the USB drive, the paper with my logins, and the envelope. Then I placed everything in a folder and wrote the date and time on it in marker like I was building a case file. Because that's what it was now. My job wasn't high profile, but it was sensitive. I had access to contract documents, pricing agreements, compliance reports. If someone used my credentials to pull data, it would look like me. And if Paige had handed my access to someone else, then my relationship wasn't the only thing at risk. My life was. I called my friend Devin first. He wasn't in law enforcement. He wasn't an internet sleuth. He was just the one person I trusted to be calm. Devin listened without interrupting, the way good friends do when they can tell you're not being dramatic. He asked one question that made everything real. Have you checked your work account yet? I hadn't. My hands were steady when I opened my laptop, but my stomach wasn't. I logged into my work email and saw 3 missed messages from the compliance team. The subject line on the newest one turned my blood to ice. Urgent, unusual download activity plus external IP. I opened it. There was a timestamp from last night. A record of files accessed. A note that my account had connected from an IP address not associated with my home or office. They hadn't disabled my account yet. That meant they were still investigating. Which is corporate language for building a timeline before they decide who to sacrifice. I didn't respond by email. I called my manager directly. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice flat in a way that told me he'd already been briefed. I explained what happened, carefully, clearly, leaving out relationship drama and focusing on the only thing that mattered. Someone had obtained my credentials without permission, and I had physical evidence. I offered to come in immediately. He hesitated, then told me not to use my work laptop. That was the 3rd confirmation. They were already looking at me as a potential threat. I drove to the office with my evidence folder in the passenger seat like it was a fragile organ. The roads felt too normal for what was happening in my chest. At the building, security didn't stop me, but they watched me longer than usual. People always do when they've been told a story about you before you arrive. In a glass conference room, I met with my manager, an HR rep named Tanya, and someone from compliance who didn't introduce himself like a person. He introduced himself like a consequence. I laid everything out. Router logs. Screenshots. The envelope. The list of my logins. The USB drive. Tanya's eyebrows lifted when she saw the paper. The compliance guy's eyes narrowed at the USB. My manager's face did something I'd never seen before, relief mixed with anger. Because my evidence didn't just defend me. It implied an internal leak. A larger problem. And companies don't like larger problems. They like one person they can fire. I watched them absorb the facts, and I realized the truth. Paige and Connor didn't just betray me. They picked me. They chose me as the fall guy because I was close enough to steal from and stable enough to blame. The compliance guy asked for the USB. I didn't hand it over. Not yet. I told them I would, after I spoke to a lawyer. That made Tanya's mouth tighten, because HR hates when employees get smart. But it also made the compliance guy sit back, because he knew I wasn't panicking anymore. I wasn't begging to be believed. I was building a case. I left the meeting with one clear instruction: don't contact anyone involved, don't discuss it with coworkers, and don't log into any company systems until they finish the review. In other words, stay quiet while we decide what to do with you. I didn't stay quiet. I drove straight to a small law office Devin recommended, run by a woman named Marisol who looked like she'd seen every version of human stupidity and survived it. She listened, asked practical questions, and told me something that hit harder than anything Paige had said. If they used your credentials, the company's first instinct will be to protect itself. Not you. Marisol advised me to file a police report. Not because the police would solve it quickly, but because it created a time-stamped record that I reported theft of credentials and unauthorized access. Paper trails save people. I filed the report that afternoon. Then Marisol did something I hadn't thought of. She asked if Paige had access to any of my personal accounts, banking, taxes, anything. I checked in the parking lot on my phone. And that's when I saw it. A new notification from my bank. New payee added. My throat tightened. I opened the details. A payee with a business name I didn't recognize. Added at 2:58 a.m. While Paige was just getting a ride home. I called the bank immediately and froze transfers, changed credentials, added extra verification. Then I checked my credit report. There was a hard inquiry from a lender I'd never contacted. And there it was, plain as day. Someone wasn't just stealing data. They were reaching for money. They were building a financial path that would lead back to me. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. Paige had been living with me, sleeping next to me, smiling at me, while quietly turning me into a tool. And the worst part wasn't that she'd chosen Connor over me. The worst part was that she'd chosen my destruction as collateral. That night, around 10 p.m., Devin came over with takeout and a look that said he'd been thinking about this all day. He asked if Paige had any reason to hate me. I almost laughed. Paige didn't hate me. She didn't feel strongly enough for hate. Paige had simply decided I was useful. Then Devin said something that made the room tilt. I looked up Connor. Connor had a full name, of course. Devin found it through Paige's public work posts and a tagged photo. Devin ran that name through the kind of basic search most people never bother doing. Connor wasn't just a coworker. Connor had been sued for fraud at a previous company. Settled quietly. No jail. No headlines. Just a paper trail buried under legal language. And attached to that suit was a name that stopped my breathing. Felix. The same Felix mentioned in Paige's email thread. Not a random reference. A person. A pattern. A crew. I stared at Devin like I didn't recognize my own life. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about me and Paige. This was something organized. Something repeated. Something designed. And Paige had just walked out of my apartment with her laptop, her phone, and whatever else she'd already moved under my name. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. No one spoke for a second, just breathing. Then a voice, male, calm, amused, said my name like we'd met before. It wasn't Connor. It was someone else. Someone who sounded like he didn't need to threaten me, because he believed the trap had already closed. I didn't respond to the voice on the phone. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't demand anything. Because the moment you show fear, people like that start charging interest. I ended the call. Then I did the one thing Paige and Connor didn't expect from the guy they thought would be embarrassed into silence. I went on offense, with paperwork. Marisol had already started drafting formal notices, to my employer, confirming I had legal representation, to the bank, documenting suspected identity misuse, and to the police report file, adding the bank notification and credit inquiry as follow-up evidence. I forwarded Devin's findings about Connor's past lawsuit to Marisol, and she nodded like it fit too neatly. Repeat behavior, she said. This is how these people survive. They keep the damage just below the level where anyone wants to go public. I asked her what the play was. Marisol told me the truth in one sentence. Make it more expensive for them than it is for you. The next morning, compliance called me back in. They'd analyzed the external IP. It traced to a shared workspace location across town. A place with cheap membership packages and anonymous entry. A place someone like Connor would use because it felt clean. They wanted the USB. Marisol came with me. That changed the entire tone of the room. I handed over a copy of the USB's contents, not the original, Marisol had insisted. The files weren't romantic photos. They weren't messages. They were spreadsheets and exported datasets. Rate sheets. Contract summaries. Customer lists. Stuff that could absolutely be sold. Stuff that could absolutely destroy my company's trust and my own career. But here was the twist Paige and Connor hadn't anticipated. 2 months ago, my company rolled out a new internal monitoring tool. I was part of the pilot group because my team handled sensitive contracts. The tool logged not just downloads, but user behavior patterns, mouse movement, session duration, and device fingerprints. It was meant to catch credential sharing. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. But compliance had. They pulled up the session from last night. My account did access files. But the behavioral data didn't match me. Not even close. Different typing cadence. Different mouse pathing. Different device fingerprint. Someone had used my credentials, yes. But the system could prove it wasn't my hands on the keyboard. The compliance guy looked at me like he was recalculating the story he'd been told. Then he looked at Tanya from HR. Then he looked back at Marisol. And for the first time since this began, I saw a shift. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I was their lead. Because now the company had something it wanted more than a quiet firing. It wanted to catch whoever was stealing from it. I left that meeting with my account restored, full pay continued, and one promise: they were escalating the matter. In plain English, they were contacting federal authorities. That same afternoon, Paige texted me. Not to apologize. To bargain. She framed it like she was willing to talk if I didn't ruin her life. She hinted that things had gotten out of hand. She suggested we could handle it privately. That message told me everything I needed to know. She was scared. Not of losing me. Of losing control. Marisol advised me not to respond. Instead, she sent one clean, formal note to Paige stating all communication should go through counsel. Paige called Devin next. Devin didn't answer. Paige tried the mutual friends route, fishing for what I knew. No one bit, because Devin had quietly warned the only two people who mattered, the ones who wouldn't run to Paige for drama. Then the final piece clicked into place in a way I didn't expect. 2 nights later, I got an email from a woman I'd never met. Subject line: I think your girlfriend did this to my brother too. Her name was Naomi. She wrote in tight, careful sentences. She said her brother had been investigated at his job last year for unusual access. He'd been dating a woman named Paige at the time. Not my Paige, I thought, until she attached a photo. It was Paige. Same smile. Same expensive blazer. Same eyes that didn't know how to look guilty. Naomi explained that her brother had nearly lost everything. He didn't have proof. The company quietly pushed him out. Paige disappeared from his life like smoke. Naomi had been searching for patterns ever since. When she saw Paige tagged in a work event photo online with Connor, she started digging. And when she saw Paige's name linked to my public engagement photo from last year, she reached out. I stared at her email until it felt like the floor softened under me. The wow factor wasn't that Paige cheated. The wow factor was worse. Paige wasn't impulsive. Paige was professional. This wasn't a messy affair. This was a method. A routine. A rotation. Get close to a stable guy with access. Live in his life. Harvest credentials. Hand them off. Exit before the collapse. And Connor was just the current delivery system. I forwarded Naomi's email to Marisol and compliance. Within a week, my company's investigators linked Connor's workspace IP to multiple suspicious sessions across different accounts, not just mine. Connor wasn't just flirting with coworkers. He was farming access like a business. And Paige wasn't just justifying a late-night ride. She was moving pieces. One morning, 8 days after the 3 a.m. ultimatum, 2 plainclothes officers came to my office with questions. They already had a name, Felix. They already had a file. They asked if I recognized Paige's handwriting. I did. They showed me copies of notes recovered from a storage locker registered under a fake LLC. The notes contained login lists, usernames, passwords, and little personal details that only someone close would know: birthdays, pet names, security question answers. Marisol later told me the case had widened beyond my company. Multiple victims. Multiple industries. A pattern. Paige's final attempt at control came the day after Connor was detained. She showed up outside my building. Not dramatic. Not screaming. Just standing there like she still belonged. I didn't go down to meet her. I watched from the lobby window while security told her she couldn't wait inside. She looked up, like she could sense where I was. For a second, her face softened, almost human. Then her expression turned sharp again. Like she remembered she didn't need tenderness. She needed leverage. But she didn't have it anymore. Because the living room pile wasn't just her belongings. It was the boundary line where my life stopped being hers to use. Weeks later, HR closed my internal case officially. My record was cleared. The bank confirmed no successful transfers. My credit was locked before any new accounts were opened. I didn't win in a cinematic, movie-ending way. I won in the only way that matters in real life. I walked away intact. Paige didn't. The last thing I heard about her came from Marisol, who kept her voice neutral like she always did. Paige had been charged, not just for what she did to me, but for what she'd been doing for years. And Connor? Connor was just the coworker. The delivery guy. The one who thought he was clever because he could smile in someone else's hallway at 3 a.m. Turns out, confidence doesn't protect you from consequences. It just makes the fall louder. And every time I make coffee now, I still hear that mug shatter in the sink. Not as pain. As proof. Because that night, Paige offered me an ultimatum she thought would scare me into obedience. Instead, it became the moment I finally chose myself.